Hey, this is Tink, and this is going to be a video documenting my 2-day adventure on the Pacuare River in Costa Rica. What you're going to see here in these first few clips are just some scenery of the river on our first day. You'll notice the lush tropical vegetation. You may also notice that the water isn't particularly deep, and we have to navigate over lots of small shoals that aren't really rapids because the water is so low at this point. This trip was supposed to have multiple class 3 and class 4 rapids. However, our day 1 guide explained that we may not see the rapids in all their glory because of the current low water levels. It was still a fun trip down the river despite the water being low, and I was constantly impressed at the guide's ability to navigate this large boat through really narrow rock channels and over shallow water with just an incredibly high level of finesse. This trip occurred over 2 days in early February 2023. Our guides explained that they had had a somewhat dry month since the really peak of their rainy season, which they said was in December. It seems like while the Pacuare is able to be rafted year-round, coming out to raft it during their actual rainy season whenever the water is higher would probably be a more fun trip down the river than what we had. I really hope to be able to come back at some point in the future during that season and see this river in all of its glory. National Geographic calls the Pacuare a top 10 river in the world. We chatted a lot with our guide about the river and the ecology surrounding it, and I asked him if this river was similar to what we call in the United States a wild and scenic river. He didn't know what I was talking about, but did explain that the river's not dam controlled and the area around the river on the banks is preserved. So I did a little bit of research after arriving back home, and it is designated as a wild and scenic river. This river is really cool to me compared to a lot of the stateside rivers that I've rafted because you really do not see like structures and houses along the river banks. What we did see, which I thought was pretty cool, is some infrastructure that is in place and built by some of the local indigenous populations that still live in this region. So we saw some footbridges and kind of like rope systems through the trees that some of the local people use to transport goods across the river. And we did see in one point kind of some huts off through the trees that were the homes of some of the indigenous people that still live along the banks of this river. So that was really neat, but there's not really like developments other than a couple of the river lodges that companies like the one that I used own, and where they have overnight guests stay that are doing multi-day trips around the river. I'm going to stop talking for a bit and let you guys just see some of the cool rapids that we went through on this first section of river, and I will be back with you shortly.
Forward. Stop. Forward bottom, please. Forward. Stop. Take a step forward. Stop.
After a couple of hours of rafting, we arrived at the Pacuare River Lodge. This is really more of a river camp than a lodge. It's right on the banks of the Pacuare River. It's owned and operated, it seems, by the same company that I did the rafting tour with, or if it's not owned by them, it's definitely they're contracted with them. The property was absolutely beautiful. However, the accommodations were a bit more rustic than I was really prepared for. Just, I'm a hiker, I'm a backpacker, I'm used to having kind of less than luxurious accommodations. But whenever I pay $100+ a night for an accommodation and I'm told that it's going to be a lodge type accommodation, there's like a certain expectation I think that comes with that, and the accommodations here definitely didn't meet that expectation. We stayed in these little hut slash shacks that were not very protected from the elements. I did stay dry overnight, even with rain, but ultimately, and I'll touch base on this in a future blog post and video, but there were a lot of bugs in my hut, and I ended up getting a bug bite that led to a nearly year-long ordeal with an infectious disease, and it was kind of a nightmare, and that boils down to just the fact that the accommodations really didn't provide the kind of protection that I expected them to in this environment. One of my favorite parts of the lodge, even with kind of the issues that I had, is this beautiful outdoor kitchen area where the chefs prepared really fantastic meals for us for lunch, dinner, and then breakfast the following day. This outdoor kitchen is absolutely incredible to me. There's a full kitchen with sinks, stoves, dishes, etc. back there, and then hammocks and picnic tables where you can look out over the Pacuare River. I really loved this space and want to model something similar after it on land that I now own in North Carolina. After lunch on the first day, our guide David took us on a hike to a waterfall. We followed a really kind of a rugged, not official trail down behind the lodge and came out to this beautiful spot where we could swim in the base of a waterfall. On the morning of day 2, I awoke after having an actual pretty good night's sleep. Had breakfast, a sort of typical Costa Rican breakfast, and then things got a little weird. We were asked to carry all of our gear up to a higher pavilion. The lodge is kind of on a hillside, and at the very top of the hill there's an access road that is 4x4 only, so we were instructed to leave all of our belongings in a pile by the side of that road, which would be left there until someone came and picked them up to take them to the outpost that we were ending our trip on today. I was really uncomfortable with this, as were several of the other guests that were heading out with us today. My passport, my wallet, and pretty much all of the belongings that I brought with me were just going to be left on the side of a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, and I was hoping that they would end up at the same place I ended up at the end of the day. Unfortunately, we really weren't given any other alternative, even though the day before, we had been allowed to carry all of our gear in the boat with us. So we all kind of begrudgingly left our things and went hiking down the road to where our raft was waiting for us down at the river. We came to the first riverside waterfall pretty quickly, and our guide was just like, "Oh, there's the waterfall," and kind of blew past it. After that, we hit some decent rapids. Honestly, this part of the river was just absolutely gorgeous, and the rapids were a lot of fun, a little bit more interesting than they were the day before. We had a video boater today. We were supposed to have pictures the whole time, and turns out we only got them on day 2, but he was super responsive and always out ahead of us on the rocks, taking pictures as we came through the bigger rapids, which was awesome. We eventually came to a second waterfall that flows right into the river, and there were lots of other boats around. Some were stopped in eddies, and others were even out on the rocks taking pictures. Everyone in my boat asked the guide, even, the Spanish-speaking boat people were like, "Hey, can we stop at this waterfall and take pictures?" And he just ignored us and acted like he didn't understand what we were asking him to do, which was really a little bit off-putting to me. Kind of one of the advertisements for this trip is that you get to stop and see these riverside waterfalls. Another selling point for it for me was that it said that each day we got to stop and take a hike part of the way through the trip, and we didn't do that either day. Our day 1 guide did take us on a hike, but it was after we reached the lodge, and that hike was also included in the itinerary, so it's not like it was an alternative option. So we only got 1 hike instead of 3, and while we did see some really beautiful riverside waterfalls, we didn't get to stop and enjoy them or take pictures of them. The second day, we were supposed to also stop midday for lunch, and our guide really tried to blow that off as well. He did eventually stop for lunch for us, but only when the guide in the other boat insisted that we stop. We were all starving. I think he was really thinking we were just going to go all the way to the outpost and have lunch there. But overall, the trip was absolutely beautiful. Just wasn't quite what I expected in terms of what I paid for.